Well, oh, well, oh, well. Welcome in, everybody. Jim here, and we're going to be talking about out the front knives today. And specifically, we're going to be talking about the Grant and Gavin Hawk knives Deadlock. This is a full custom knife, and its reason for being is there's actually a couple of reasons for it. This is getting to be a very crowded sector now in today's modern tactical style knives. A few states are getting a little bit more lenient about people owning and or carrying, please do check your local laws, owning or carrying of automatic knives. Here in Texas, they were recently made legal. You don't even need to have any sort of carry permit or anything like that. And we're allowed to carry automatic knives. Pretty friggin' great. And now we're starting to see a lot more hitting the market. And obviously there have been manufacturers and custom makers that have made fantastic products for as long as any of us can remember. But the out the front market is a very specific market. And you'll hear people talk about one specific reason why they don't think that an out the front automatic is a reliable or even a good choice for a defensive carry or tactical carry or whatever many various reasons people like to carry knives. And that reason is because they feel that they're not going to be as strong as other types of knives, namely a folder. And then, of course, you get the fixed blade guys that tell you that folder's not a strong lock. You got to have a fixed blade if you want to do real work. Okay, settle down there, Chief. This isn't a work knife, so we don't have to really worry about that. But a lot of people are concerned because they get into a typical out the front knife like what I've got here, and you can jiggle the blade a little bit. And that really is, it's not a knock against any particular manufacturer. You guys know that I'm a big fan of Microtech and Tony Marfione, and it's great products. But we've always dealt with the fact that there's going to be just a little bit of up and down play, side to side play, and even a little bit of in and out play. I like in and out play. My wife will tell you that. Anyway, it's something that we're used to dealing with, and it's not really that big of a deal. Another thing is they feel that they can't take any kind of hard use, in particular a double action where the switch both fires it and retracts it, that you can't stab it into things or jam it into things because it's going to collapse into the handle. And in some cases, on really cheap knives, yes. And even on more expensive ones, if you really, if you jam it into a steel drum and start beating on the back of it with a hammer, I'm sure you're going to get a lot to fail at some point. Well, the goal for this knife was to satisfy even the most particular and picky customer. Father and son, Grant and Gavin Hawk, began like many other knife makers. They were making fixed blades. And it really didn't take them all too long to get themselves into making folders and starting to get into more unique styles of knives. He's made some really cool curios, like the coin claw that I don't even want to call it that because that's somebody else's name for their knife. But there's God, what does he call that? My mind is blanking on it right now. I apologize, Gavin. I have one. I own it. I love it. Basically, you wear it around the neck, and when you put your finger through the ring and yank it off of the necklace, it deploys and opens up a claw-style knife. It is really cool. So they're always thinking of ways to do different things. They don't see things like the rest of us do. Gavin analyzes every part of a knife and figures out new and inventive ways to create wildly different things in the industry. From lock concepts to unique mechanisms for opening a knife. They've done some pretty wild things, really. And now they wanted to get into the out the front knives and tackle some of the big issues that both owners of out the front knives complain about and skeptics of out the front knives use as a platform for why out the fronts are unreliable or undesirable at the least. So like I said, the goal for the Deadlock was simple. in theory anyway. Execution, that's different. Making out the front that locks in place solidly, like a good quality folder. Zero blade play, not less blade play, but absolutely void of any wiggle, shimmy, rattle, or anything. Grab it, shake it, you'll see for yourself, it doesn't move. You saw about a minute ago as I was doing all of this with my Microtech, and I'll do it again just so you have a back-to-back comparison. You can also hear it on my microphone as well, I believe. They don't move. They don't do anything. It is as rock solid as, well, as you could ever hope it to be. Gavin achieved his goal. Basically, the blade is being forced into locking up in sort of a wedge. And that's the best way I can really describe it for now. Unfortunately, it's just kind of the way it is. It's being thrust forcefully into that wedge, so how does it not get stuck? Because if you take something and you force it into a wedge, it's going to stay there. How the hell are we retracting it? Well, that's where more of that engineering genius comes into play. The wedge itself is under a spring tension that allows for a little bit of over travel. So it lets the blade come to rest firmly, yet still be retracted by the switch. I know, it's crazy, it's nuts. And honestly, Gavin tried explaining this to me on the phone when we talked a little while ago. But talking to him is a lot more like talking to an engineer than a knife maker. Much of it really just went over my head. Between cams, steel bearings, and stop pins working together in an unconventional way that nobody else does, it prevents the movement of the blade once it's engaged. I mean, it's really awesome shit. The other big thing was to tackle a common complaint from out the front users. I can't open up my out the front to clean it without a degree from MIT. Or, if they are mechanically inclined enough to be able to open it and get it back together and do that successfully, they run into issues with manufacturers claiming that disassembly is going to void their warranty. Now, before you guys get all in a huff about that, it's not really something to knock a manufacturer about necessarily. Listen, people sending in bags of parts because they couldn't figure out how to get their shit back together cost them a lot of customer service dollars. And think about it this way too. It can give them a bad rep. If someone takes their knife apart, does whatever maintenance they're doing, does a really shitty job of somehow managing to get it back together, and it kind of sort of works sometimes, then they end up selling it. The next owner or two owners later don't know the story behind that knife. They don't know that it was the original owner that did the damage. All they could think of is, well, the manufacturer's name who's on the knife obviously made a shoddy product, and I'll never buy it ever again. And then they spread that out throughout the world. So, these bigger, especially the really big production brands out there will tell you, don't open up our out the front automatics. If you need service, you need your blade sharpened, you need something done, send it to us and we'll do it. We don't want you monkeying around with the shit that we make. And those are the reasons why. So that is a real sore spot for a lot of out the front owners. So Gavin says, not only am I designing my knife to be disassembled by the user, but I'm actually encouraging it. And I mean, again, he went through the whole process with me. I'm not going to do it. I'm holding two of his very expensive custom knives here. I don't want to be that idiot sending back a bag full of parts. But what he says is, he goes, honestly, he goes, you should do it. He goes, it's the easiest thing you can even imagine. The mechanisms, by the way, are not built into the chassis. The mechanisms are built into the blade, which is something else I'm unfamiliar with. When you tear apart one of these, the mechanisms are set up inside of the chassis, inside of the frame. And all the workings of this knife are actually set up in the blade. Very, very cool. And so basically all you're going to do is you're going to take these screws out and just simply lift it apart. And he says if it doesn't want to come apart easily, just take the blade and shimmy it and use it as a wedge to kind of pull it open. And once you pull it open, voila, that's it. It's that simple. And you can blow out the dirt and dust and gunk and lubricate and do all the things that you want to do on your own without sending it into him or anyone else. So for those of you that own out the front automatic knives, and you get really, really angry by companies saying you're going to void your warranty if you open up this knife, whether you know what you're doing or not, we don't want you opening up our knives. Gavin says, hell yes, open up my knife. In fact, he's going to start making different hardware and give you a tool that matches the hardware in the packaging and give you instructions on how to disassemble your knife. It doesn't get better than that. Another evolution, I should probably go back. What he's done is he's evolved the processes inside of the knife. There are fewer and fewer and fewer parts in each of the evolutions of this knife. This is the third edition of the Deadlock from the prototype. And I think he said somewhere around 7 or 9 pieces have been eliminated. And the next version is going to have 2 or 3 or 4 fewer pieces inside of there. So it's going to become easier and easier for you to disassemble and take care of your knife. And that's an amazing thing. It's a really, really cool thing. I was going to talk about the switch. When I played with his prototype a couple years ago at the Blade Show, it was more or less a rectangle with a square sitting on top of it. So it was just a stepped switch. And that was the first thing I told him. I said, I don't like the switch. I don't like how it feels. He says, but I like that switch because it doesn't look pretty, but it gives you the perfect leverage. When you look at because I told him, I said, you got to do a serrated ramped switch. You got to, because that's what everybody else does. He says, well, when you have that, what you're doing is you're not just pulling back as you're retracting the blade, but you're inadvertently pushing down at the same time. So you're actually using more strength, and the switch feels harder by having a shape like this than like that. But a lot of people gave him hell for that switch. They didn't like it. They didn't like how it looked. It broke up the look of the knife. And he says, I'm going to give the people what they want. But he designed this in such a fashion that you're still using a lot less downforce on this switch than you do on a typical switch. So it actually feels like you have a lighter pull when you don't. He says, I made 2 knives side by side. My prototype, which had my old one, and the new knife, which had this switch. Every internal component was the exact same. The springs, everything, exact same. And this felt a little bit heavier because of the way that it makes your finger sit on it. Now, this is what we're used to, though. And this is what I like. And this is the smoothest and gentlest action I've ever felt on an automatic switch. I've got some that are just ridiculously hard. My Ultratech probably takes a couple pounds more pressure. My custom, my combat interceptor takes a lot more. The stronger the springs are, the more force is required to slide the switch back and forth. So what do you have here, basically? Okay, you're getting into an overall length of 8.875 inches. This is a large knife. Putting it next to an Ultratech, for example, and next to a Halo 5, you see just how large it really is. They are considerably larger than the Ultratech and considerably smaller than a Halo 5. Blade length of 3 3/4 inches with a cutting edge of about 3.5 inches. So it's a good sizable knife. I mean, you can see that just me holding it in my hands. I love the shape of the chassis. It's really, really comfortable to hold this knife. And this is also working sort of, not quite as much as a hilt would, but it is preventing your fingers from just gliding up that razor sharp blade. So you've got a nice firm hold on it. The frame comes in a little bit from that point, and it feels really, really, really nice in the hand. This one's embellished a little bit differently than other variations will be, so this is an entire titanium chassis, if you will. And then all of these additional components here are flame-treated titanium. You've got a very large Hawk Knives logo right there. I love how this is done because it gives you traction on the knife. No matter where you're holding it, it's designed to be held in any number of ways. You've got the traction here, which, by the way, I don't know if we can quite get this. We were discussing the way the switch was serrated. He says, think of like a rasp or a file where you can run your finger in one direction and it's almost smooth, but the other direction, it catches and it sticks to you. He says, if I didn't have all of those individual lines cut, because these are undercut, if there was just one line there, it would be like running your finger across a razor blade. It would actually slice you open. But because of how many are there, this was actually his father's idea, because of how many that are there and the way this is shaped, it's not going to do that. It's a really, really cool thing. So just a little extra story there for you that he gave me. So we went over the sizes, the specs, how it's made, the different finishes. They're going to do some that have naval brass accents. They're going to have some that are carbon fiber chassis with titanium accents. There will be different ways that you can order it. I like this. I like the flame-treated titanium. It's something that they've done on other knives, and it looks really, really good. I don't know if you're going to be able to read it here on camera, but on either side, these are going to be marked. This side actually says Deadlock, G&G Hawk, patent pending, and they do hold quite a few patents, by the way. And on this side, I'm having a hard time reading it myself here. Oh, it's backwards, that's why. 2016 and CTS 204P. I brought out my halo for a specific reason. The reason I did that is when we talk about out the front automatics, there's a little bit of a difference between getting into a single action, which this is. I have to now depress this and pull the charging lever because there is no spring that retracts the blade for me. You get a lot less blade play, but it's still there. And I don't know if I can quite make it show up here or not. Yeah, you really don't see it all that much. There's a little more side-to-side play, but it's not really going to show up too dramatically. But there is play. Here is my custom Marfione, which costs a lot more money than these do. I mean, a lot more money. Typical double-action automatic. There's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't mean that that knife isn't a fantastic, amazing knife, and it's not worth the money that it is. It truly is. It just means that Grant and Gavin Hawk have found a way to perfect the out-the-front automatic. And you might want to stop and say, well, but Jim, they're not the very first to have given us a solid lockup. You go back to the Sand Shark. Sand Shark is a thing of legend. It really is. And you can buy some now on the secondary market for $2,000 and up. They don't exist anymore. I mean, they went out of business. Desert Knife Works, by the way, is who made it. They don't make knives anymore, so it's not like they're even around. There was still a small little bit of play. Now, if you compare it to any other double action out the front, it was almost non-existent. Please do keep that in mind. But there is a little bit of play. Not dramatic, but it's there. With these, however, there is none. I mean, zero, nada, zip, zilch. It doesn't move at all. And I find it amazing that they were able to achieve that with these knives. I personally like the dagger grind the most. However, living in Texas, we're not allowed to own daggers. We cannot have double-edged knives of any kind, automatic or manual, doesn't matter, which is a really bizarre thing, but that's just the way it is. So everything that I have is a single-edge knife for the most part. So For me, I would be opting for the single edge variation, and many of you might just feel that that's more useful for you, or that it might be safer. The worst cut I ever got in my life, and I still have the scar on my finger to prove it, was from a double-edged, double-action, out-the-front automatic. It was my old Microtech Scarab. And it was just me being a dummy. I was cutting something open. Oh yeah, ironically, I was cutting open a get well card from a surgery that I was just recovering from, and it was the day that I was going back to work after being out of work for 7 weeks. And for some reason, I was careless with the knife, and I went to move it, knowing that I was doing it toward the back of the blade, not thinking I had a double edge, and it just went right through me, and it almost went to the bone. And after 20 minutes of bleeding, I went, oh yeah, I guess I should go get stitches. So there may be other reasons why you feel that you want to have a single edge knife. More power to you. They offer it both ways. So you're going to have different materials, different finishes, and you'll have different blade grinds to choose from, and it's a nominal price difference. Now, for me personally, it fires too softly. But like I told you earlier, Gavin is a genius. He says, well, I'm just going to make it really, really simple. There are people that want a lighter switch, that they don't feel like they're having to break their thumb to open it and close it, and we've all talked to people that have talked about that. So that's going to be, let's call it standard for sake of this video. And for those that want a super crazy, fast, hard firing blade, which also means you're going to have a stronger switch, more like what I've got on this, then I'm going to offer that as an option. So, maybe we'll call that, I don't know, we'll call it a standard and hard firing, I don't know. So you're going to be able to select your release strength when you order, coming up very, very shortly. Basically, it's not just changing out to a stronger spring, which is what I thought it was going to be. He says, no, it's not just changing out to a stronger spring, because, as I mentioned earlier, that wedge system that they're using to engage this lock, again, that has a little bit of spring tension. If the springs were firing at the blade out much, much harder, it would overshoot the area that it needs to stop, and it would get permanently wedged in there. It would cause issues. So he would have to change a few internal parts from this one to the hard firing version, if you will. So when you make that decision, just realize it's not swapping out a spring, and it's not something that you're going to be able to change on your own. If you decide you want to go back and forth, which I can't imagine why you would, but it's important to mention, it's not going to be a user serviceable thing, because you'll be missing required components aside from the spring that you're talking about there. So you are going to have that option. I think that's really cool. So that takes away the only operational thing about this that I don't like, is the fact that, yeah, it's a little bit soft. Honestly, it feels like any number of other automatics that are out there, but that's just my personal thing. The few out the fronts that I have fire extremely hard, and I'm just used to it, that's all. So you'll get that option here as well. Another thing for me on this one, and Gavin's going to be so mad at me, but this is really, honestly, a completely personal thing. I prefer a side switch. I prefer my switches on the top side of the knife as I grip it. Totally a personal thing. I know people that prefer it this way. This is much more like the Benchmade Infidel. And God knows they sell a shit ton of those, don't they? So again, that is a truly personal preference as to where you want your firing switch at. It's not a deal breaker for me. It's not something I would say, well, I wouldn't buy one until he put it up here. I like it. And the way that he's done this oversized switch feels really good. It becomes part of the grip of the knife, and I really, really dig that. The other thing that I really like is the way he's designed this. When the switch is in the forward position, you don't see two open tracks or two exposed travel slots in the body like you do on the Benchmade. Go look at a picture of the Benchmade Infidel. Oh, wait. See? It looks cheap. It looks terrible. It's an exposed area into your knife for no reason. So, he's really thought about everything and done everything right. So anything that I may not have liked about a Benchmade, having the switch there, he is taken care of. Oh, one last thing to mention. How did I forget this? Another little innovation, something that they started doing a few years ago, and it's available now on the mud knives and everything else. Just a slightly different execution, but same operation. Is the clip here. So it's really, really easy to get in and out of your pocket, yet it still maintains a lot of tension. I was talking to a buddy of mine today about this because he saw me put the pictures up on my Instagram. He's like, oh, so it's kind of like the clip design they used on the Marfione and Monroe collaboration sigil knife. I said, no, it operates differently. Number one, it's not flush in the body, but those, the way they worked, they didn't have a lot of tension when it was in the pocket. And I always kind of felt myself checking to see if my knife was still there, that my seatbelt in the car didn't push it up, or squatting down to do something on the ground didn't force the knife up out of the pocket a little bit. This has a good degree of tension, and you still have the usable lip right there on the underside. And I mean, this is, it's a nicely executed version as well. It looks just like a nice standard, 3D milled titanium clip. However, it's built with that hinge, with that fulcrum right there. And it's got a good degree of spring tension. And if you want to practice your Morse code, you're able to do that as well. So there we have it, guys. There is the Deadlock by Hawk Knives. I told you everything I believe that I know about it. Hopefully I've answered any and all questions you may have. The question you might have for me is, do I like it? Yeah, I do. I love out the front automatic knives. I really, really do. It's a little bit larger than some people may want to carry, so keep that in mind. If you're an ultra tech kind of guy or a Troodon kind of guy, it just may be too big for you. You carry something like a combat Troodon or a Scarab or something like that, this is going to be right up your alley. If you want it to be lighter weight, simply buy the carbon fiber variation, where the whole body, the whole chassis is made of carbon fiber. So I love how it feels in the hands. It has a fantastic ergonomic feel to it, even though it's such a very, very, very large knife. It's very tall, it's very thick, it's very bulky. However, it works. It fits in the hand really, really nicely. I like the fact that it's super strong. Gavin is going to be producing some videos to show you the strength, where he's going to abuse these things to show you that it's virtually impossible to collapse the locking mechanism that he has in there. And again, that's engineering shit that I'm not going to profess to understand, but basically the knife would explode before that blade is going past those ball bearings that are locked into place when it opens up. And which, by the way, he is reinforcing all the hardware to make sure that even that is never going to be an option. So, yeah, I dig the knife. I think it's very, very cool. Knowing that I will have the option to have a harder firing version, sign my ass up. That was the one and only thing that would have kept me from owning one of these. And now, knowing that option is available, there's no reason to say no. So you now get the chance to say no to blade play. You don't ever have to worry about having a blade that does anything. It's just, it's in there, man. Oh, by the way, you're hearing the switch move. There's nothing. You hear the spring inside. You hear that? That's it. What you don't hear is this. And that's fucking cool. All right, guys, that's it for me. Super long video. I apologize for taking up so much of your time, but I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it, and I hope you understand the importance of what this knife represents to the out the front automatic knife loving community. And I hope to see a lot more of these popping up on Instagram. These are being made available pretty much right away. I know there's only one single individual knife available at this exact moment while I'm recording this on Hawk Design's website, but I know that he is in the process of hand building another wave of these, and there'll be another wave coming very soon thereafter. So the first thing that happens when you go to their website is there's a little pop-up that tells you to sign up for the newsletter. Sign up for the newsletter because you'll be alerted when the new waves come around. I would not hesitate on these. If you've been in the knife community long enough, you've heard people heralding the amazing, the nearly sent from heaven sand shark, which really wasn't all that attractive of a knife, but it was a solidly built knife. And those are done, those are gone, and they still didn't lock up as well as this. They still didn't have all of the quote-unquote technology that this has and the engineering that this has. So this is pretty much the new game changer for automatics. So enjoy them while they're here. It's a custom-made product. They won't be around for very long, and they're never going to make very many of them. So enjoy, and I'll catch you guys on the next video.